Hi you guys, it's me, Arden Lee. I am back with another video. And I want to make a video tonight that is a little bit about soulmates and the nature of true love and the idea behind the concept of finding the one, right? And whether we agree with that or not. What I want to do with it is I want to expand our understanding around it to make it a little bit more quantum so that we can talk about these concepts in a way that is useful to the mastery that we are calling in regarding regarding creating our reality and acknowledging just how quantum our reality is and is swiftly becoming. This is man, you guys, it's so funny that I used to be a pickup artist because now that now that I can feel my body again, now that I've have been working on resensitizing my body and all of that entails and allowing myself all the archetypes that have been so scary for me before. It's like totally funny coming on and making a video about love and relationships. It feels so much more vulnerable than when I used to talk about, hey, here are the 3 ways to approach someone you're attracted to, right? It's so funny. But here I am. I'm wearing my Magdalene red tonight, so this is what's present. This is what wants to be spoken into reality. So so it feels vulnerable to talk about, but I genuinely want to explore these concepts, and I want to explore them publicly because I think they're important things to think about. And quite frankly, I kind of want more people geeking out on them with me because Lord knows I'm not going to find more answers in, the Lightwork or Facebook groups or the Twin Flame groups, or whatever. So yeah, I want to start putting some of this a little bit more out into the collective because it's important, And how am I going to call in a soul aligned relationship if I'm in some way avoiding the topic of it just because it feels scary, right? How's that for? Okay. So anyway, so yeah, I have been, in having thought a lot about these concepts and feeling like I'm not ready to fully share my thoughts on them because because I need more time, because I need because I really like to only typically talk about things that I feel more certain of. And but whatever, but this is what wants to come forward, so I'm just going to get into it. So first of all, there's this idea out there in the collective that's very typical of heteronormative lifelong aspirational monogamy, right? The typical thing that we think of when we think of what society thinks of as true love, right? Which is this idea of finding the one. And it's represented in the tarot by the 10 of Cups, right? Cups are the suit of water, which means emotions, love, relationships, sometimes friendships, creativity, but it's like the love card. And since 10 is the last numbered card in the suit of cups, the 10 of Cups represents our happily ever after, our, it's the rom-com card. It's and they lived happily ever after, and there you have it. So it's that energy that people tend to think of as finding the one, right? But this idea that it's about finding the one then shows up in toxic ways in our society, and we have a backlash against it because people say, listen, you don't find the one because nobody is going to solve your issues. Edgar, get down. Excuse me. Stop it. Sorry. Edgar does not yet know which surfaces he is allowed to be on and which ones he is not allowed to be on. So anyway, where was I? Right. So we have this idea that, happily ever after happens when we find the one. And then we have a backlash. The pendulum swings back in the other direction against that idea because there is toxicity and corruption in that idea. Even though there is a grain of truth to it, there is a way that it becomes co-opted in society where people think, well, I'm just going to find the one and that's going to solve all my problems. It's not about me not doing the internal work. It's not about me not getting into alignment. Each of my relationships is not working out. It must be that person wasn't the one. When I find the one, then we just won't need to make it work at all. It'll just click into place and everything will be fine. And naturally that's not how it works. So there's this backlash that says there is no such thing as the one. You have to do the work on yourself. And no one is going to come along and save you, basically. There is no human being that you can just plug yourself into if you haven't done if you haven't done the work on yourself. And importantly, if you expect that everything is going to go perfectly once you meet the one, and the first time you have conflict or something arises that's like a glitch or it doesn't go right, instead of learning to navigate it together as a team and saying we're choosing this, it's like a binary. It's like, oh, well, if you did XYZ, then you must not be the one, and you break up and then you go and you start all over again. So I understand, like, all of that is true, right? These things can exist simultaneously. And I'm starting to think of this idea of of soulmates, or of the concept of the one being quantum, right? When we're in quantum time, it means that we change our reality based on our vibration. So again, it's that idea that I just literally made a video like just 20 minutes ago about how I was like, I hate when people are like, it doesn't take time, it takes getting into alignment. And I'm like, yes, but alignment takes time. So now I'm saying it, right? It's this idea that when we're working with quantum reality, when we're working with absolute creative freedom and self-sovereignty, then we can it's not about linear time anymore. It is about our vibration. It is about exponentialism, right? It's like Jason Silva says, you can take 10 like regular linear steps, or you can take 10 exponential steps and get bigger, right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger because you're plugging something different into the equation. So in quantum time, we understand that. And yes, it still does take some linear time to get into quantum time, right? Because everything takes practice. But it takes time to manifest your results. But yeah, we can speed things up by getting into the vibration, into alignment with receiving the thing that we want to receive, right? So, and if we abide by the idea, which I do, that in many ways we attract what we are, right? We absorb that which is around us, and we attract that which mirrors us. It's not that it's our fault, if we attract something that we don't like, or if something happens to us that is poor. But if we are making a choice to stay in it, on some level at the very least, we are in that vibration, right? It may take us some time to get out. It's fine, but ultimately we are. It is true that. That when there is that click, that someone that we might like pass, like 100 people in a day, but when there is someone that we pass and for whatever reason, there's that click or that hook that says, oh, I want to get to know this person better, and they feel the same way, it's because there is that mirrored vibration, right? So that's how you can kind of tell what kind of sticks around. It's like you can't miss what's meant for you because these things are like puzzle pieces. You can take two puzzle pieces apart, but they still fit together because of their shape, right? If two things are alike, whether they're close or far away, there's still going to be a match, right? So so that's how we end up saying that we attract what we are. It's just that way of again, we could pass 100 people, but the person that sticks with us, that we feel that resonance with, it's because there is some sort of similarity or or just some shared vibration that's going on there, or a shared way of viewing one another, or and we also, I also like to say, like, we train people how to treat us, right? So if someone is showing up in a certain way, No, we can't control other people's actions. Everyone has free will. But again, the vibration that we go into that interaction with is going to affect the response that we get from that person in return. And as someone who has done a lot to experiment with her vibration over the past couple of years, I can absolutely attest that that is true. And I know that I know that there are differences in my friendships and interpersonal relationships now, that it's different now than it was, say, when I was like in my early 20s, because of the way that I'm bringing myself into the interaction, and because of the ways that I'm valuing myself, because I had to teach myself to value myself in ways that I wasn't taught to value myself, just naturally growing up, right? So things do. So given that, right? What if the idea of the one is quantum? And what if all the one means is that at the time, at this point in our 3D reality linear time, the one happens to be that person who has that like near 100% resonance with our vibration. And what that also means then is that if relationships don't last forever, it's not a failure. And we knew that already, right? Like even when I was back in the dating coaching sphere, there were dating coaches and sex educators who used to say things about relationships like depth, not duration, right? That was one of Reid Mihalko's, I think. He used to say like, hey, measure the quality of your relationships by the depth, not their duration. You can have people who are married for the rest of their lives, but they're miserable. But you can have like a wonderful relationship that just lasts, a couple years or even just a couple months, and it can still be something that was a success, right? So measure success by the quality, not by how long it lasts, which is something we are bucking against in, this sort of marriage-centric heteronormative culture. So that's something that gets said a lot already. But what if the energetic mechanics behind that is this idea that if we can change what we attract by changing our own vibration, whether that happens intentionally, whether that happens as a result of our circumstances, or just as a result of us passing through chronological time and the way that our soul blueprint is meant to unfold, what if it means that the one can change throughout your life? And what the one means is just that it's that person who matches your vibration as perfectly as possible in the present moment in time. Wouldn't that be interesting? What would that mean for all of our narratives about true love? How would we start thinking about things like second or third marriages? Right? How would we start thinking about time, even as a concept? This feels important because, man, I don't know, you guys. It feels like in the field right now, there's a lot of fractalization that I'm frankly having a little bit of trouble orienting myself within. For those of you who are familiar with the concept of twin flames, which is the heroes gamos, essentially. It's the alchemical sacred union, where you have these two perfect polarities, like the yin and yang, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and they come together and they fit perfectly together. But the idea is that with all their social programming and wounding on it, like that's actually keeping them in this illusion of separation, right? And so they have to realize that they're actually whole. And so what happens is, there's this catalyzation, where it's like, oh shit, I'm suddenly realizing like everything. It's like when you call in true love, then everything that is not in the vibration of love gets called up to be released, right? It's like, oh, now I know what that is. So I have to, like, anything that's not in alignment with that, I have to get rid of. And it seems like, and so the mythology around that, And it is a mythology, and also mythologies can show up in our realities too. So I'm not giving credence to. I'm really not. Yeah, I don't need anyone to believe whether that's true. I'm sort of just talking. If you can imagine, like, even if you just want to imagine it in a sort of like life imitates art kind of way, right? These are the stories that show up because these are the stories and the mythologies that we have around love. If you want to say that, that's fine. Um, the same way that like everyone got Jennifer Aniston's haircut when Friends was on TV. So, oh my God. So looking at that, there's this idea that that this alchemy happens, but that it's meant for the purpose of that sacred union. It's meant so that it can so that that can happen and come together. And there's this idea floating around the collective lately in those sort of spheres because the light workers circle, the whole spirituality community is really in kind of like a twin flame frenzy right now, for better or for worse. And it's great, like it's a wonderful path. It's great, like you can take really good lessons out of it, and there's also a lot of traps in it too. There's a lot of ways that it can also, anything can be a medicine, anything can be a poison, and it can really enable codependency too. Although it's funny because of course if you use it the right way, it actually cures codependency. So anyway, make of all of that what you will. I'm not going to get into all of my feelings about that at this time, but that is the concept that I wanted to explain to you. And there's been this sort of thing going around the twin flame collective lately where more and more people are talking about, the twin flame is an energy. It's not a person. And the energy can transfer from person to person because in this 3D reality, we have free will. So therefore, if the growth isn't happening, at the same rate or whatever, you're going to end up moving on, and then you'll vibrate like with another person who actually is like in your stage of growth. And so, so if you're envisioning that, if you could envision like this energy that almost passes from body to body, like from host to host as you're on this journey and shows up in other people. And I'm like, okay, if we're using that as a metaphor, that's great. But it's like we went first. It's like it keeps getting more and more exponential. It keeps getting more and more, it's like a fractal spiraling outward, like I was saying. It's like, at first, like this idea of the twin flame concept was like walking the path, like gets you there, but you're in linear time, right? The more steps you take, again, like you take 10 steps, you take 10 linear steps, right? So you're taking these steps, it's going to take you that time. And then you learn, you're like, oh, actually time is quantum. So actually I've been taking these linear steps the whole time, which really I could make my next 10 steps, 10 exponential steps. And then I could control like, more and more when I get to that place of sacred union. And even then you're like, oh shit, that if that means that like I can speed things up, does that mean also I can slow it down? Does it mean now that there's something that I could actually do that would have it, be farther from me, right? And then you start you feel like you're in this, if for anyone who's read House of Leaves, it's like the staircase, like expanding. You guys have read House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. It's this great, wonderful horror novel that I read when I was at NYU, and it's like, there's the house is like bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's very quantum. And there's a stairwell, like a winding stairwell that goes down like into this ending, like never ending tunnel. And it can expand and it can contract. So, so you think you're at a certain place in this stairwell and you've brought like all your equipment and your flashlights and you're measuring, all the ways you're measuring the depths and everything. And then the tunnel just goes like, whoosh, and all of a sudden you're like 500 miles from the top of your, where you went into this stairwell in the middle of your living room that suddenly appeared there because you're in this house that's shifting from the inside. And it feels like that. You're like, all of a sudden I was right here and now I'm here and now I'm here. So everything keeps getting bigger and bigger. And now this idea that not only is the timeline quantum, but like that the people who show up for you are quantum. man, you guys, this is like, I'm not sure. Because what it triggers in me is this idea of space madness, right? It's this idea that if everything, like, I'm a writer and I believe in narrative and I believe in that satisfying place of like everything is going to come back, right? Like everything comes full circle, because otherwise everything could just keep expanding, and when does it stop? And that's something I actually have, like, I've had nightmares about that, about things like that. I have had nightmares about everything keeps, like I keep getting higher and higher and higher, and I can't come back down. I'm going off into infinity is actually kind of a phobia of mine. So as things get more and more quantum, I'm like, I thought I knew where I was going, right? And and so that's like, um, yeah, I'm just not sure, because I also know that part of quantum time is also that sometimes, like, the depth of our surrender to what is present, um, also accelerates our path, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I was explaining this to a friend of mine who's, um, quite in the 3D reality, but he likes superhero movies. And I said it's like when it's like at the end of, so spoilers for Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, by the way, but you've probably seen them already, so I'm gonna just go ahead. In Avengers Infinity War, there is this moment where half of everyone gets dusted, and Doctor Strange looks at Tony Stark and says, "I'm sorry, Tony, but it was the only way." And we remember where Doctor Strange has been doing these timeline calculations in his head, like how is it possible that we win? And he's like, there's 4,300,000 whatever it was, ways that that we could lose. And Tony Stark is like, how many timelines are there where we win? And he's like, one, right? So then they think they've lost at the end of Avengers Infinity War. They think that like half of everyone is gone. That appeared to them as losing war, right? And everyone who saw that movie was like so triggered by that. And I was like, you guys, they can't actually do that to the whole Marvel verse, right? Like, that's just like, you can't just say, okay, canon, half of all people are dead. Right? And that's kind of how I'm feeling about all this quantum talk in the twin flame path lately, is I'm like, you guys, you can't just say that half of the characters are dead. Like, it just doesn't feel like it works that way. But in Avengers Infinity War, Doctor Strange says that's the one timeline where they win. And then of course in Avengers Endgame, like, and everyone comes back. Of course that's going to be what happens. But you really have to, sometimes you got to let yourself get dusted. Right? So, so I wanted to speak a little bit on that, and on this idea that we keep looking for, we keep talking about the one in society as though it's this thing that we lock into with something like matrimony, and then we have the rest of our lives together. And I get where that comes from. And then we think that if it doesn't work out, or if it doesn't last, that was a failure, right? And so therefore, since thinking of that as a failure is not always helpful either, there is again that backlash that comes back and that says, no, there is no such thing as the one. There is someone you choose and you make it work. But what if what was really present was the fact that in every moment there is someone who is the one, but as you are changing and evolving, then the person you're going to attract is going to also be everyone is changing and evolving. So maybe all the one means is that at this moment in time, you are a complete match in vibration. I think that would be a really cool thing to think about. I think it would bring a lot less pressure onto our relationships, and also a lot more realism, and also a lot less disappointment. And of course, it would have to mean that since people can change, and we can grow, and we're changing all the time, it builds more forgiveness and more, quite frankly, realism. into the fact that that just because we feel one way now doesn't mean that we're going to feel it forever. We really do ourselves a disservice by imagining that feeling in the moment like we want to be with someone for the rest of our lives is that's always going to be true. And moreover, that it's always going to be true without our continuing to choose it every day, that we just take it for granted that that's going to happen. And I think it would allow us to still retain the magic and the romance and the mystery of the universe, and the fact that sometimes we can just connect with a person and that feels like that thing, the thing that we call the one. And maybe if we release it from linear time, we're actually able to celebrate it in a way that that doesn't crush it, you know, and that still looks at it realistically. So I'd love for us to start thinking of things in those terms, you know, that the one isn't, we're not killing it. We're not saying it's a fallacy and just there's all these random people and you make a choice, right? Because of course there is such a thing as alignment and falling in love and soulmates and magic. Like we see that all the time, you know, and it happens. It happens in it's not just fairy tales. It happens in real life too. And it's a real phenomenon. But, you know, movies only last 2 hours. We have a lot more time to deal with than that. And time is quantum. So, and I think it would allow us also to really invite ourselves more into wholeness and to more self-responsibility too. And also to realize that we can always find the one in any moment, and that our age doesn't matter because it's the vibrational alignment in the present that matters. And that, you know, and that just as easily as we can find the one, we can also make changes, you know, we can also evolve in different ways and whatever. And all it means is like, yes, there will be sadness, there will be like tearful goodbyes, I'm sure, but all it means is the reality that we are no longer in alignment, and that that's okay. And that all it means is that we're both in different places now, which means we're going to be aligning with something different. And it's not necessarily better and it's not necessarily worse. It's just the right thing for where we are right now. You know, Edgar is a different cat from Virgil. And when Virgil passed away, my mom was like, oh, honey, you're never going to find a cat like Virgil ever again. And I was like, I cried and I was like, Mom, you can't tell me that. I know that you trust me. I love Virgil, you love Virgil, but if I'm to deal with mourning him, I have to leave myself open to the possibility that I can meet a cat that I love and have a close relationship with just as much as with Virgil, or even possibly more. And even if it's not like Virgil, maybe what it will be is I will find a cat who is as much a match to me as I grow into my future self when I have that cat, as Virgil was a match to me for the last several years that he was my cat. My mom was like, wow, you're right. Sorry. And maybe that's how we should start looking at relationships too. Maybe that's really what the one should mean. Thank you guys for watching. And I hope this was helpful enough to you to be worth the total vulnerability hangover I'm going to have tomorrow. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.